The first time Chenua saw her, the sound struck him before the sight did, a sharp crack of leather cutting through the twilight, louder than a rifle shot in the still evening air. He froze beneath the cottonwoods, every muscle taut, as the echo rolled across the valley. His sharp eyes scanned the open yard of the ranch below, where the last rays of sun flared across the dry earth. That's when he saw her on her knees in the dust, her hair hanging in tangled ropes around her face, her father's boot grinding into her shoulder. The Old West was no stranger to cruelty. Chenua had seen men shoot each other for less than a spilled drink, had seen settlers burn Apache camps to the ground without shame. But this was a cruelty different. It was not quick or loud. It was methodical, ritualistic, the kind of violence that repeated itself until silence became its own cage. The woman, no, not a girl but a grown woman, 30 if she was a day, did not cry out. Her lips bled, her cheek bore the dark mark of fresh bruising, but she did not raise her hands, did not beg. She only stared at some faraway point beyond the horizon, eyes lit not by fear but by something stranger, something Chenua could not yet name. Her father loomed over her like a storm cloud. A heavy-set man, his face lined with whiskey and hate, his belt curled in his hand like a snake ready to strike again. "Stand up," he roared, the veins in his neck bulging. "You'll not shame me with your silence, girl. You'll answer when I speak." Evelyn, that name Chenua would learn later from town whispers, only pressed her lips tighter, the thin trickle of blood shining as it slipped down her chin. Her silence enraged the old man further. The belt cracked across her shoulder again, snapping the fabric of her dress. Still, she did not move. Chenua's breath burned hot in his chest. His Apache heart pounded with the urge to step from the shadows, to put an end to the man's cruelty with a knife's edge. But the world was no friend to men like him. If he struck now, the town would not ask what the father had done. They would only see a savage attacking a white settler, and soldiers would come hunting him before the blood even dried dot, so he stayed in the cottonwoods. A shadow among shadows, his jaw locked, his hand curled tight around the hilt of his knife. The setting sun painted the sky in bands of red and gold, a cruel beauty against the ugliness below. Dust swirled around Evelyn as she finally pushed herself up on shaking arms, her ribs heaving with effort. She looked small under her father's looming figure, yet there was a fire in her stillness, something unbroken. Chenua's eyes narrowed. Why did she not fight back? She was not frail. Even from a distance, he could see the strength in her shoulders, the firmness in her hands. 30 years old, still young enough to endure, strong enough to defy, but she did not. Every blow she accepted as though it belonged to her, as though she were carrying something larger than herself. The father spat into the dirt and yanked her up by the arm, shaking her until her head whipped back and forth. "You'll remember your place," he growled, before shoving her hard against the post by the barn. Her head struck wood with a hollow thud, and still she said nothing. The silence between them was heavier than the violence. Chenua's chest ached with something he could not name. This woman Evelyn was no stranger to pain. That much was clear. But there was something else in the way she endured it, something that twisted inside him. Her stillness was not surrender. It was sacrifice. The old man finally staggered back toward the house, muttering curses, belt still clutched in his hand. Evelyn slumped against the post, her breath ragged, one hand clutching her ribs. For a moment, she closed her eyes, tilting her face toward the dying sun as though drawing strength from its last light. Then, slowly, she gathered herself, rose to her feet, and walked inside without a sound. Chenua remained under the cottonwoods long after darkness swallowed the valley. The image of her burned into his mind. He had seen men beaten, women broken, warriors crushed beneath the weight of war. But never had he seen someone embrace pain so willingly. He did not yet know her name. He did not yet know her secret. But in that moment, He knew one truth: he could not turn away. The next morning, Dry Creek Town buzzed with its usual noise, wagon wheels crunching over gravel, shop doors creaking open, and the sharp clang of the blacksmith's hammer echoing across Main Street. But beneath the hum of everyday life, there was always gossip, thick as smoke in a saloon. Evelyn's name rolled off tongues like it was everyone's right to own a piece of her story. Wild as a coyote. "That one," muttered a woman outside the Mercantile, her voice sharp with disapproval. "She's 30 and still ain't wed. Trouble follows a woman like that. She's got her mother's blood. Nothing but sin in it." Genoa lingered on the edge of town, listening without appearing to listen. The Apache warrior had long ago learned how to become invisible, how to melt into the backdrop of white men's towns that wanted him dead or gone. His long black hair caught some stares, his bare chest and tribal jewelry drawing suspicion. But most folks were too busy wagging tongues to notice him linger near the livery stable. None of the whispers explained the truth he sought. Why did Evelyn, strong in body and spirit, endure her father's nightly cruelty without a word of protest? Why did the town allow it? By noon, Genoa had learned more from silence than from words. He had watched Evelyn herself. She moved through the day with an efficiency that unsettled him, hauling buckets of water from the well, chopping wood until her palms blistered, and carrying baskets heavier than most men's pride. Every swing of the axe, every turn of her shoulders, revealed a body built from endurance, not fragility. Yet the purple bloom of fresh bruises on her arms told a different story. Once, she paused at the trough to splash water across her face. The cold wetness dripped down, carrying specks of dried blood away. For a brief moment, Evelyn met her own reflection in the water. She did not flinch at the sight of her swollen cheek or split lip. Instead, her jaw tightened, and she muttered under her breath, "Not yet." Those two words struck Genoa like an arrow. Not yet. What was she waiting for? That evening, Genoa returned to his post in the cottonwoods overlooking her father's ranch. The sun dropped low again, and shadows stretched long across the valley floor. He crouched, silent as a wolf, his eyes fixed on the same scene he had witnessed before. The old man stumbled from the house, belt coiled like a snake in his hand. His voice slurred with whiskey. "Girl, you think you're better than me? You think silence makes you holy?" Evelyn stood in the yard, her face calm, her body still. Her silence seemed to provoke him more than words ever could. The leather belt cracked across her back once, twice, 3 times. Each strike echoed in the dusk air. But Evelyn neither cried out nor lifted a hand in defense. Her shoulders only twitched with each blow, her eyes fixed on the horizon where the last sliver of sun melted away. Genoa's grip tightened on his knife until his knuckles blanched. His people taught restraint, patience, the wisdom of striking only when the spirit demanded. But what spirit could demand patience in the face of such cruelty? His blood ran hot, yet he remained rooted in shadow. To act now would bring soldiers, men with rifles who would not hesitate to paint the dirt with Apache blood dot when at last the old man retreated inside. Cursing her for her silence, Evelyn sagged against the fence post. Sweat and blood stained her dress, but her eyes were fierce, defiant. She whispered again, so faint that even Genoa, hidden close, strained to hear. "Not yet. Not yet." The words wrapped around him like smoke. They were not the words of a broken woman. They were the words of someone carrying a secret, a burden that explained why she did not run, why she endured. Genoa's mind churned long after she disappeared into the dark of the house. He had spent 3 nights watching, 3 nights of restraint. But the mystery of Evelyn pulled at him stronger with each passing day. Why did she not fight back? Why did she not flee? And what was she waiting for? As the stars blinked to life above the desert sky, Genoa whispered to the night, a vow only the earth could hear. I will know her reason. On the fourth night the heavens broke open. Rain swept across the Arizona plains in wild sheets, hammering the earth until the parched ground turned to mud. Lightning forked across the sky, illuminating the valley in stark, fleeting flashes. Genoa moved silently through the storm, his long black hair plastered to his shoulders, his chest glistening with rain. He crouched near the barn, the thunder masking his presence. From the house, he heard the growl of a man's voice, the father slurred and raw with drink. The storm outside was fierce, but the storm inside was fiercer. A glass shattered against the wall, followed by the hollow thump of wood breaking. Then came Evelyn's muffled cry, swallowed quickly as though she were ashamed to let it escape. Genoa's hand closed around the hilt of his knife. The urge to act clawed at him. Every instinct of a warrior told him to protect, to strike down cruelty where it lived. But another voice, the cold wisdom of survival, whispered restraint. To spill a white man's blood was to bring the wrath of soldiers, of bounty hunters, of every settler in miles. He could not save her by dying in vain. Still, his body trembled with the need to move. Then, through the downpour, he saw her. Evelyn burst from the front door, stumbling into the mud. She collapsed to her knees, clutching her side, dragging herself forward by her elbows. The rain plastered her hair to her face, her dress clinging to her skin, the bruises on her arms dark as storm clouds. She spat blood into the mud and whispered something Genoa almost missed. "Not yet. I can't." Not yet. The words were carried away by thunder, but Genoa heard them. They struck him harder than any blow. Evelyn crawled to the side of the barn, pressing her back against the rough wood. She tilted her head upward, letting the rain wash over her, eyes closed. Lightning lit her face, and for an instant, Genoa saw not a broken woman but one carved out of iron and will. Why did she not run? The storm was wild, the night dark perfect cover for escape. She could vanish into the desert, into the mountains, never to face her father's hand again. Yet she stayed. Genoa's heart pounded as he watched her struggle to her feet, her hand pressed against her ribs. She swayed but did not fall. With stubborn determination, she staggered back toward the house. Each step was slow, agonizing, but resolute. He clenched his teeth. She was walking back into the fire. The father's shadow filled the doorway, lantern light spilling across the yard. His face was twisted with rage, his whiskey bottle dangling from one hand, belt coiled in the other. "Think you can run from me, girl?" he shouted over the rain. "You'll learn your place if it kills you." Evelyn did not answer. She lowered her head and walked past him into the house, her silence cutting sharper than any blade. The old man's curses echoed after her as he slammed the door. Genoa remained crouched in the storm, every drop of rain beating against him like drums of war. His knife felt heavy in his grip, his spirit torn between patience and fury. He had been taught that some battles were not won with steel but with silence, with waiting for the right moment. But how many moments could a woman endure before silence crushed her? The storm raged on, but Genoa's thoughts were louder. Evelyn's words echoed again, "Not yet. I can't." Not yet. What was she waiting for? What held her bound to a life of beatings and silence? When the rain finally eased and the thunder rolled away into the mountains, Genoa remained in the shadows, soaked to the bone. He had seen cruelty before, but never a cruelty endured with such purpose. It was as if Evelyn carried a secret burden, one that demanded her suffering. When she could not yet lay down, he would find that burden. He swore at God as dawn crept across the drenched valley. Genoa slipped back into the trees, his jaw set, his heart heavy. He was no longer merely a witness. He was a hunter now not of prey, but of truth. And the truth lived in Evelyn's silence. The storm broke into a quiet morning, the air heavy with the smell of wet sage and earth. The sky stretched wide and pale over the Arizona plains, every puddle shimmering like broken glass. Genoa had not slept. His mind circled Evelyn's whispered words, "not yet." They clung to him like thorns, sharper with each memory of her bloodied face in the rain dot. By the time the sun climbed high, he was already following her tracks. The mud recorded her passage like scripture, narrow footprints pressed deep, weaving a trail away from her father's ranch. She hadn't left at dawn to fetch water or chop wood. She had gone into the hills. Alone, Genoa moved swift and silent, the skills of his people guiding him. He knew the land's secrets, the way rock slides hid paths, the way mesquite trees bent where water once ran, the way silence thickened when someone was near. He tracked her up a narrow ravine where the earth bled red against the bright sky. Each print she left bore signs of strain, her gait shortened, her weight shifting to one side. Her ribs were still tender from her father's blows. The path led him to the gaping mouth of an abandoned mine. Its timbers sagged with rot, iron nails rusted from years of neglect. The air that drifted out carried a damp, metallic scent, stone and shadow. Genoa froze, crouching among the rocks, his dark eyes fixed on Evelyn's figure at the entrance. She carried a lantern in one hand, her other pressed protectively against her ribs. She paused, kneeling low, placing her ear to the earth. For a long, strange moment, she simply listened, her brow furrowed with intent. Then, without hesitation, she rose and slipped inside. Genoa's pulse quickened. What business did a beaten woman have in a forgotten mine? Gold had long since been stripped from these hills. Only ghosts remained in tunnels like that. And yet Evelyn's posture was not one of fear. It was of purpose. He waited. Patience was in his blood. But time dragged, and the silence of the mine grew heavier, pressing against him. Finally, unable to resist, he crept closer, his moccasins soundless against the stone. He placed a hand on the cool wooden beam of the entrance, peering into the darkness. From deep inside, the flicker of Evelyn's lantern glowed faintly. Shadows danced across the jagged walls. He could hear the faint scrape of wood being shifted, the creak of something heavy being moved. Then soft voices. Too high-pitched to belong to Evelyn or her father. Children's voices. Genoa stiffened. His breath caught. 2 hours passed before she emerged again. She blew out the lantern just before stepping into the daylight, as though protecting her secret from the world. Her face was pale but calm, her hands trembling only when they brushed across her bruised ribs. She closed her eyes, tilted her head to the sky, and exhaled a sound heavy with exhaustion but also with relief. Then, with her shawl wrapped tight, she began the long walk back to town. Back to her father. Back to the fists and the belt and the silence. Genoa's spirit churned with questions. Why did she go into the mine? Who had spoken within? Why did she return willingly to the man who broke her body night after night? He followed her trail down the ravine, keeping his distance. When she paused at a stream to wash her hands, he saw her reflection in the water, a woman hollowed by pain but not broken by it. He wanted to step forward then, to ask, to demand an answer. But his tongue held still. He knew enough of her by now to understand that she would not reveal anything she did not choose. As Evelyn walked back into the valley, Genoa crouched by the stream, his fingers trailing through the cold water. He had seen many kinds of courage. He had seen warriors face rifles with bows, seen mothers carry children through deserts without water. But Evelyn's courage was stranger, quiet, hidden, wrapped in bruises and silence. He lifted his gaze toward the mine, the black mouth yawning in the cliffside. Whatever secret lay in its shadows, it was the reason she whispered, "Not yet." It was the reason she endured. Genoa's jaw tightened. He would return to that mine. He would know the truth she buried there. The river carried the moonlight like a silver ribbon, restless and whispering as it wound through the valley. Evelyn sat on the bank, her knees drawn up to her chest, the hem of her torn dress soaked by the damp earth. She stared at the current as though it might sweep her secrets away. The sound of the water was almost enough to soothe her, almost. But her bruised ribs ached, and every shadow in the night made her flinch. Behind her, the soft crunch of footsteps. She stiffened, clutching a smooth stone in her hand like a weapon. "You need not fear me," a deep voice said. The stone slipped from her hand. She turned, and there he was, the Apache warrior who had haunted the corners of her days, the man she had glimpsed in the storm. His long black hair hung loose over his shoulders, glistening faintly in the moonlight, and his chest was bare save for the tribal jewelry gleaming against his bronzed skin. His eyes, dark as obsidian, held neither judgment nor pity, only watchfulness. "You," Evelyn whispered. Her voice trembled with both relief and fear. "You've been following me." Genoa stepped closer, silent as a wolf, though he kept his distance at the edge of the trees. "I have watched," he admitted, "because I could not turn away." His voice was low, roughened by both the language of his people and the strain of something deeper. "A woman beaten every day by her father, yet still alive. This is not ordinary." Evelyn's throat tightened. The words cut deeper than her father's blows. She wanted to lash out, deny, hide. But the weight of his gaze stripped her of pretense. "You don't know what you're talking about," she said. "Then tell me," he urged. The river seemed to hush, waiting for her answer. Evelyn buried her face in her hands, dragging in a breath that shook her chest. She wanted to scream, to sob, but what came out was only a whisper. "If I speak?" "Everything ends." Genoa knelt, his hand brushing the earth but not reaching for her. "Sometimes ending is the only way to begin again." The words, spoken in his heavy accent, carried more truth than she wanted to hear. Evelyn lifted her head, the moonlight catching the dark rings under her eyes, the defiance that hadn't yet been beaten out of her. "You wouldn't understand. He's not just cruel, he's protecting something. Or maybe he thinks he is. And if I speak, if anyone knows," her voice broke, "it won't just be me he kills. He'll burn this whole place down." Genoa's eyes narrowed, studying her as though he might see the truth etched on her skin. "What is worth such pain, such silence?" She laughed, a bitter sound that startled even her. "You think I don't ask myself that every night?" The river swelled against its banks as if echoing her despair. For a long moment neither spoke. Only the wind in the cottonwoods and the restless water filled the silence. Finally, Evelyn rose, hugging her arms against her bruised body. "You should go," she said. "Whatever you think you're doing, it'll get you killed. My father, he's not the man people see. He has power, influence. He'll crush you without a second thought." Genoa rose with her, his broad frame a shadow against the night. "I have already faced death many times," he said. "It is not me I fear for." His gaze lingered on her, steady, unwavering, her breath caught. For the first time in years, she felt seen not as a burden, not as a weakness, but as something worth protecting. And that terrified her. She turned quickly, walking along the river bank, but her steps faltered. "Don't follow me," she called over her shoulder. "If you care at all, you'll stay away." But Genoa did follow, not openly, but as silently as the night itself. He knew something now, something hidden beneath her broken words. Whatever secret she guarded, it was no ordinary shame. And he vowed, with every beat of his heart, that he would uncover it before it destroyed her. The river roared on, carrying their unspoken truths into the dark. The morning sun burned hot over the ranch, bleaching the fields in gold. From the outside, everything looked ordinary cattle lowed in the distance. Dust lifted off the fence rails, and the clank of a hammer rang from the barn. But inside the farmhouse, the air was suffocating. Evelyn stood in the kitchen, her hands trembling as she scrubbed a pot that didn't need cleaning. The soap stung the raw cuts on her knuckles. Her father sat at the table, hunched over his coffee, his eyes sharp and bloodshot from another night of whiskey. He didn't speak at first. He just stared. The silence between them was worse than any shouting. Evelyn kept her eyes on the soapy water, her chest rising and falling too quickly. "You were gone last night," he said finally. His voice low and dangerous. Her hands froze in the suds. She willed herself to breathe, to keep her face blank. "I couldn't sleep," she said. "I went down to the river." His chair scraped loudly across the floor as he stood. "You think I don't hear things? Folks in town say you've been seen alone, whispering at night, like you're hiding something." His boots thudded against the wood as he moved closer. "Who's been filling your head, girl?" Evelyn shook her head, gripping the pot so hard her nails dug into the metal. "No one," she whispered. He slammed his fist against the counter, making her flinch. "Don't lie to me." His hand shot out, seizing her arm. She gasped, pain flashing up to her shoulder as he yanked her toward him. His face was inches from hers, the sour stench of whiskey still clinging to his breath. "If you've been talking, if you've told anyone," his grip tightened, "you'll regret it." A sharp memory flickered in her mind. Chenoa's voice by the river, calm and steady. "Sometimes ending is the only way to begin again." Evelyn wanted to believe those words, but right now, ending looked a lot like dying. "I swear," she managed, forcing the words past her fear. "I haven't told anyone." Her father studied her, suspicion burning in his eyes. For a moment she thought he might release her. Instead, he shoved her backward, and she hit the counter hard. Pain bloomed across her ribs, the same ribs that had been bruised too many times before. She clutched her side, choking back a cry. "You're mine to keep in line," he snarled. "Don't forget that." He stormed out, slamming the door so hard the walls rattled. Evelyn slid to the floor, trembling, one hand pressed over her ribs. She knew then that her silence was wearing thin. He could sense it, like a wolf smelling blood. Outside, unseen from the window, Chenoa stood hidden among the mesquite trees. He had followed again, unwilling to leave her in that house of violence. He had heard the muffled shouting, seen her father's shadow looming inside. His jaw tightened, every muscle in his body coiled with the urge to act. But he didn't, not yet. He knew that one wrong move could bring the entire town and Evelyn's father's wrath down upon them. Both. Evelyn dragged herself to her feet. She staggered to the basin, splashing cold water on her face. The reflection that stared back at her was not the girl she used to be. It was a woman hollowed out by pain, yet still alive, still fighting in her own quiet way. Her father's threats rang in her ears. She knew he was watching her closer now. She couldn't risk being seen with Chenoa again. But the thought of never hearing his voice, never feeling the strange safety of his presence, twisted something deep in her chest. That night, long after her father had passed out in his chair with an empty bottle at his feet, Evelyn slipped outside. The moon was thin, the sky clouded. She pressed a hand to her ribs, wincing, but forced herself toward the river, and there he was, Chenoa, waiting as if the earth itself had whispered her need to him. He stepped forward, concern etched into every line of his face. "You are hurt again," he said softly. Her eyes brimmed with tears, but she shook her head. "No more hiding," she whispered. "I can't keep living like this." Her voice broke, but her gaze held steady on him. "Chenoa, I have to tell you the truth." The river murmured at their feet, carrying her words into the night. The secret that had chained her for years was ready to break free, and Chenoa braced himself, knowing whatever she revealed would change everything. The night pressed heavy over the river, the sky a quilt of clouds that swallowed the moon. Evelyn stood at the water's edge, her breath trembling in the cool air. Her hands were clenched at her sides, her body trembling not from the bruises her father had left, but from the words trapped in her chest for years. Chenoa waited a few paces away, silent, steady as the earth. His long black hair stirred in the breeze, glistening faintly where drops of river mist clung to it. The tribal jewelry against his skin caught the lantern glow Evelyn carried, small sparks of light on his powerful frame. His eyes, deep and searching, never left her. "You don't understand," she said, her voice breaking. "You see a cruel man and a woman he beats. But it's more than that. It's worse." Chenoa stepped closer, his bare feet sinking into the damp soil. "Tell me." Evelyn's breath hitched. She turned away, staring at the current. For a moment, the river seemed to whisper the words for her, carrying them where she had never dared to send them. Finally, she spoke. "My father." "He is not my father." Chenoa's brow furrowed, but he said nothing, letting the weight of her words hang in the night. "He told me when I was 15, Evelyn continued, her hands curling into fists. "I was never meant to be here. My mother, she was Apache." Her voice cracked and she blinked back tears. "She was stolen from your people during a raid when she was just a girl. He forced her to marry him. I was the child she bore, and when she died bringing me into this world, he swore I would pay for it." The truth came out in shuddering gasps as though it burned her tongue. Every strike, every word, every lash, it wasn't just cruelty. It was punishment. A reminder that I carry her blood. Evelyn's shoulders shook. "Your people's blood." For the first time since she had met him, Chenoa moved closer without hesitation. His strong hand brushed against her trembling arm, not to claim, not to restrain, but to anchor her. His touch was warm against the chill of the night. Evelyn turned to him, her tear-streaked face etched with despair. "Now do you see? If he ever learns I've spoken with one of you, he won't stop until he's wiped out every trace of what I am. Me, you, anyone who knows." Chenoa's jaw tightened. His eyes darkened with understanding. "So he beats you because you are half Apache," he said, his voice low, vibrating with restrained fury. "Yes," Evelyn whispered. "And I stayed silent because, if the town found out, they'd side with him. They'd call me a half-breed. They'd hate me the way he does. So I swallowed it. All of it. For 30 years, her voice cracked again. But I can't anymore." Chenoa's hand rose, brushing a tear from her cheek. "You are not shame," he said fiercely. "You are not his curse. You are strength. Your blood carries two worlds, not one." His gaze softened, though fire still burned beneath. "You survived what would have killed many. That is power he will never take from you." Her sob broke free then, ragged and raw, but it was not only despair, it was release. She leaned into his chest, her forehead resting against the warmth of him, feeling the rise and fall of his breath, steady and grounding. "I don't know what to do," she whispered. "You do," he said, his voice almost a vow. "You came here tonight because you are ready. Ready to end it. Ready to begin again." Evelyn closed her eyes, listening to the river, to the drum of his heartbeat against her ear. For the first time in her life, she believed escape was possible. Not through silence, not through hiding, but through truth and the strength she had carried all along. In the distance, thunder rolled faintly over the hills. The storm was coming again. Evelyn drew in a long, steady breath. When she opened her eyes, there was steel behind the sorrow. "No more running," she said. "If he comes for me again, I won't face him alone." Chenoa's arm tightened protectively around her. "You never will." The river surged, carrying their vow into the night. For the first time in 30 years, Evelyn felt the chains of her father's cruelty break. And in their place stood something new, fierce, unyielding, and free.